Happy Friday. Happy Friday. It's Let's Talk Live with HAWM Law. We're going to let some people get in the studio so we can actually go live. We have a special guest joining us today, Heidi Rodriguez from Tax Specialist of Kissimmee. And our feature today is going to be discussing tax issues in general and in a more specific way how it applies to immigration issues and what you should be doing in relation to your tax filings if you haven't already filed your taxes. And even if you have filed your taxes, if you've made some errors, you may have the opportunity to go back and correct those as well so as to not jeopardize your immigration situation. So, very important discussion this afternoon. Heidi, thank you for joining us. Can you just introduce yourself, tell the audience who you are, give us an idea of your business, where you're located, and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Heidi Rodriguez. I am the owner and one of the specialists, of course, here at Tax Specialists of Kissimmee. We are located in downtown Kissimmee, about 2 blocks from the courthouse, off of John Young and Emmett. So of course, we do tax preparation, everything from individual to business taxes, as well as payroll, bookkeeping, and of course, we work with individuals that are looking to, obtain a work permit or an ITIN, or of course, renew it. So.
Go ahead. You mentioned the work permit and ITIN. I'm going to get into that, but I know we are in the heart of tax season, and so I really do thank you for taking the time. But can you tell what are the actual tax deadlines that we need to be aware of?
Absolutely. So, as far as the individual side, it is approaching as of April 15th. So, if primarily if you have a balance due to the IRS, you definitely want to make sure that you file and ideally pay. If it's an option, or at least file an extension. And then, of course, for businesses, if you're a corporation, you also have until April 15th. And then for like S corps, they were due back in March 15th.
And so if for the people who are procrastinating in the back of the audience, there are options to be able to be compliant even though you do not meet these April 15th, March 15th deadlines. Can you tell me what it is that we can do to avoid the penalties if we are going to be late?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you can, of course, contact your local accountant or a tax specialist and file an extension electronically. If that is not an option, of course, you can go online and complete the extension and paper mail it. Mhm.
Right. And then one of the questions I personally get in my practice as an immigration practitioner is, should individuals be filing married or separately if they are in fact married?
That's a good question. So typically, the rule of thumb, and usually in any scenario, you do want to file the way your immigration process is. So if you came in, as married, then you want to complete the process at least until that immigration is done. At the very worst case scenario, then you can always do married filing separate. And of course, there are disadvantages for that.
What are the I was going to be my next question. What are the advantages or disadvantages of married filing separately from a tax perspective?
Yeah, so advantages, you said.
Mhm.
So, of course, you have the standard deduction as a married taxpayer of up to 25,000. So that's essentially taking 25,000 off of your income, your gross income. So that'll alleviate some of your tax liability. And, typically that's the most obvious advantage, case by case, of course.
Right, absolutely. Because I know from my practice as an immigration practitioner, we do get that question often, and I'm usually of the opinion, even though I'm not a tax specialist, I'm like, you need to be filing married, filing jointly with your spouse, especially if you live in the same household. That's the proper way to do it. And in the event for some reason that you are separated or there are other issues, because I know issues arise, for example, one spouse may owe child support or have other issues and they think that's going to affect the one spouse's taxes, that always comes up, and I say at the very least, you should be filing married filing separately and ensuring that your address listed on those tax returns is the same and consistent with what you have also represented to the US government in your immigration filings. So that is kind of how I've been advising my clients, and I hope I've been doing it the right way
No,
in
absolutely.
term
You
yeah.
have, and if there is a situation like that, like you mentioned, that there's a tax obligation or some other obligation, federal, definitely speak to your local tax professional, because there are options to essentially protect your portion of the refund.
The other issue that we have is where one spouse does not have a social security number, and people get the impression that if one spouse does not have a social security number, we're unable to file those taxes at all. Can you enlighten us on what how do we work around those issues and how do we fix that?
Yeah. So, typically, if the spouse did work and earn income, then they are required to file. So, in that event, we would submit an application for what's called an ITIN. So, it's a permission to work, and that will allow them to not only report the earned income, so they don't have any issues with the IRS in the future, and then as well as that, file the application so that they can be assigned ideally what would be a social security number, but it's really an ITIN, so it's not identified as a social, but it serves similarly the same purpose
Right.
for it.
So it allows an individual who cannot get a social security number to
Exactly.
report their income in the United States, which from the immigration perspective, depending a lot on the type of application that you have, and we're not encouraging anyone to make any misrepresentations, that you should be reporting your income because if especially if you're working, you should
Absolutely.
report that income because it does benefit you in the long run, depending on the type of application that you're. And usually, if it's a spousal petition and they're married to a U.S. citizen, you unlawful employment or working without a work permit will not ultimately impact that application. So don't lie about it. Just report it and move forward,
Mhm.
right? Um, who qualifies as a dependent? Because sometimes I get tax returns and there are dependents who aren't the children, or and I'm like, what is going on? And then they're panicking because I say, okay, well, now we're doing a marriage based case, and the petitioner, who's usually the US citizen or permanent resident, is spouse is going to have to do an affidavit of support, and they have to make a threshold amount of income, and we're going to count the household and the household dependents. So from a tax perspective, who are the dependents? Who are the dependents that you can list on your US taxes?
Yeah, so a dependent is going to be typically a qualifying relative, um, or family member. So usually the rule of thumb is just about anything other than a cousin. So, any immediate family, brothers, sisters, parents, nephews, nieces. Um, but again, the cousin is the depth of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then those dependents are can you have a non-relative dependent? For example, someone who's living with you, you're caring for them. You may have temporary custody over that person. Is that also, qualifying as a dependent?
Yeah, so the one, I guess, exception to the blood rule would be that there should be some kind of document supporting, from a legal entity. So again, either a foster child or an adopted child. Those would probably be the only circumstances that you could claim someone that's not directly blood related per se.
Yeah, and we get that question a lot in our family law practice about it, especially where, you have a mother, a father, or two parents,
Mhm.
and the question is who's going to file the dependency credit or the earned income credit, the child tax dependency credit for the children. And I know the IRS says one thing, and I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Heidi, is that whoever is the higher earner and where the child spends most of the time, if well, it's where the child spends most of the time, and if they're sharing time equally, then it should be the higher earner. Is
That's
that That's what I believe the tax rule says. But and I always have to go back and explain to my clients, in the family law setting, that the judge also has the ability to alter that right,
Always.
and to order you to sign whatever documents is necessary to
Mhm.
allow the other person to claim the tax credit. So it can be that position can be altered by court order, and the IRS does accept that court order as proof of who should be filing the tax credit. So we try to encourage people to work these issues out before you go to file your taxes, because I know a lot of people go by the jungle principle about first to file and see what happens, but it does create conflict, especially in relationships.
I agree.
Another question that I have is that we have, sometimes permanent residents or U.S. citizens themselves who actually reside outside of the United States. And should they be filing taxes?
Mhm. Yeah, and those are typically referred to as like foreign nationals. So there's actually a 1040 that is specific for that type of residency. So it is considered it's a 1040 NR, and it really typically is done when there is some income that's being generated here in the United States. So yes, they are subject. They don't unfortunately get some of the tax treaties that obviously U.S. citizens would, but they are required to file. For the 1040 NRs, the only stipulation there is that they would either need to be single. If they are married, they would have to file as married filing separate.
What can I do about past due taxes? If I owe taxes, or if I haven't filed my tax return for several years, what do you recommend?
Well, definitely, we want to make sure that we set up your account on IRS, so that way we can pull the accurate, up to date transcripts, just in the event that you didn't keep all your records. And the IRS does allow us to file up to 3 years in arrear, and that way, if you're doing any type of refund, you can receive your refund, and of course any interest that was accumulated throughout the years.
Is there any trends that we need to be aware of in terms of filing our taxes year? Are there any new credits, any new um, benefits that regular working people can have access to that they are not accessing at this time?
That's a great question, Sasha, and depending on the individual's case, it's something that we can definitely take a look at and see. And that's the wonderful thing about being one of our clients, is that we do go through your entire scenario and make the appropriate suggestions. This year, there are some great credits for energy efficient, electric vehicles. Your home, any updates you're doing to your home, and again, these are based on your tax bracket. So I would say, if you have any questions or you're looking to explore and see if there are any possible deduction or benefits for you, reach out to us so that we can take a look at your scenario and make the best suggestions.
How can people reach you?
So you can reach us, of course, by phone at 407-483-8207. You can visit us on our website and schedule a virtual call, which we do have free consultations. That's at www.taxspecialistofkissimmee.com. Or stop by if you want to have a cup of coffee or chat. And you can visit us again at 1000 Emmett Street. We're in Suite 203. Just look for the star, downtown Kissimmee. Zip code is 34741.
All right. And thank you so much, Heidi, for taking some time on your busy Friday. I know I've pulled you away from doing probably a lot of tax returns at this time, but I think this information was important for people to have access to, and to know where you can find a resource to be able to file your taxes and to have your tax questions addressed. So thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for joining us on Let's Talk Live. We know I don't want to keep you guys too long on your lunch breaks or when you get a time to do this. So I will see you again in a couple weeks for our next show. Thank you and have a great weekend.